Good morning. This is Ludica Pekina with GAI Insights. Welcome to the daily AI news, where we rate news essential, important, and optional. We have a very interesting set of articles, from a Microsoft announcement to Bain article of how to improve customer experience in retail, S&P announcement, and the like. We also have a great full house today of analysts. We have John, Paul, Adam, Tim. This is great. Thank you for joining, and thank you, audience, in advance for commenting. So let's start with the first article. Ankaj, please.
Sure, Luda. So the first one that we have comes from Baird, where Wall Street Journal is saying that it's an agriculture company and it's also our newest AI vendor.
Yes, what do you think about this, Tim?
Well, I think it's interesting. I guess I would give it an optional. We're going to talk about this again in the Microsoft article later on. So the trend here, I could be talking to important. The trend here is big, that we've been talking about for a while. First, customized models, and also small models. So Bayer, which is a drug company and an agricultural company, has developed an AI with Microsoft, and Microsoft has now created a marketplace that it's presumably hosting these things, like the iPhone store and the Google Play store, to help people pick seeds, basically, in various agricultural products. But they've done it with Phi, which is Microsoft's small language model, and they've tuned it with their own data. So definitely the trends we're seeing, and there are several other models, including one from Fidelity around compliance and others, that they're releasing at the same time. And it's moving more into the traditional manufacturing, distribution, agricultural companies. So there are some interesting things here at a broad level. But, so I'm sort of borderline optional important for that reason, but it doesn't say anything all that exciting directly.
Right, and this application is focused on agronomy and crop protection, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Already are licensing themselves, and now will have a broader reach through Microsoft platform. Right.
So, Tim, I was with you. I think I'd lean towards optional on this, and then an important for the Microsoft article that rolls this up into it. But I think worth calling out is specifically notable is they're using the Phi family of small models with this technology, and then they're fine-tuning them with the industry knowledge, so this smaller model can still have good performance within that specific vertical. So it's a very smart approach, and certainly as a trend worth calling out. This specific use case, given that we have the other article, I'd probably say is optional as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, Paul? John?
Yeah, I actually am going to make the case for either this one or the one that talks about all of them for essential, because this is right down the middle of own your own intelligence. We don't have enough detail as to who owns the IP and who can get access to it.
Yeah.
I mean, literally 30 years ago, I did a project with a Norwegian fertilizer company where we put agronomic knowledge on PCs to help pull through more fertilizer, and we implemented those PCs in farmers' houses. And so I think if this is about Bayer creating new primary demand with customers by helping them understand how to use their product, and all these folks, Pioneer Hybrid and DuPont, everybody have these kind of models out there for managing your field, then it makes sense to me. If they're packaging up some of their knowledge and making it available to competitors of the channel, I think that's a really bad idea to do that with Microsoft and let Microsoft resell it to other people. So I don't know enough about what kind of knowledge is being shared here, but if I were these big companies, I'd be really careful. If it's not helping create new primary demand, I would want to have this stuff under my control, not Microsoft's.
Yep. I was going to ask you how you felt about this, because I saw it exactly the same way. It really depends upon the relationship and how the IP is licensed.
Yeah.
It's a balance, if you remember in Chunka's book way back when, we wrote about give away as much as you can.
Yes.
This very idea, but give away as much as you can without giving away the store, right?
Yeah. Tim, you should put the URL to the book and so forth. This is a book with Tim and Paul Carroll and Chunka Moy about a perfect future and the laws of free that are in there. So really fantastic book. I recommend it. All of you.
Okay, so we're going on important. Paul?
Support discussion. Important sounds great. Agreed. It is an important topic.
Yeah. Okay, important it is. Let's go next.
Okay, the next one comes from Bain and Company, and it talks about Gen AI's potential to improve customer experience.
Yeah, a long article with support data from many interviews of in retail, in customers and the like. What do you think about this, Adam?
It was long, and I think I can hear the voice of Tim in the back of my head saying, not being afraid to give our listeners something to read. And I will say this is important. They still don't have to read it, but I think there are some good takeaways. It's a fairly small survey. It was 700 people that they're basing this on, but they talk about some fairly respectable design principles in terms of the thought leadership of them. You're looking at how to complement, not replace customer shopping behaviors, for example, or the ways you can leverage it beyond chatbots. In some ways, it's very almost pedestrian or basic guidance, but at the same time, I think it's some positive steps, and people could take some away from it if they're in more so in relevant industries. But customer experience definitely has a broad reach.
So I'm hearing important. What do you think? Yeah. What do you think, Tim, John, Paul?
Yeah, I could go with important. It's got some good data. The ideas are kind of pretty straightforward. There wasn't really anything all that exciting in the insights. And free startup idea here. I think advertising in general, which is an enormous industry at this point, is ripe to be completely disrupted and upended by somebody who creates a really trustworthy AI that really knows its customers, doesn't share data, doesn't sell advertising, but instead helps people find the products they want when they're ready to buy them. Advertising is still one of the most inefficient mechanisms we've ever had. The old joke is I cancel my advertising because I know it's only 50% effective, but I can't figure out which 50%. And I think 50% is a high number these days. So anyway, that's a side note that there's real opportunity to really disrupt this whole industry. But it's not going to happen overnight. And within this current environment, this is okay.
Okay. Going important. John, Paul?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. Important it is.
Yeah, and the other reason I would argue for important is that it's a good curation. One of the AI leaders we're working for is part of their extended team that they sell retail. They're a very publicly traded company here. And this is a good curation of leading practices with Bain's number. And I think for an executive who's not on these all news calls, this is a great way to stay current.
Yeah. Okay. Important. Could you please put up the next one, Ankaj?
Yes, so the next one comes from Snowflake, and it talks about Snowflake's latest offering called Data Agents, where these agents can interact with enterprise software.
Yeah, interesting, but not released yet, right? What do you think about this, John?
I was going to give this an optional because it's not released yet. It would be essential if it had been released, I think. This whole notion of where the intelligence is going to sit in the software stack, I think, is very, very interesting. And as we've talked about before, I think the real action for vendors and for systems integrators is going to be on data and, doing a new kind of data integration. And this, their ability to not only go into this, before this announcement, right, they were just working within the data sitting in Snowflake product, and now they can actually interface with everybody's product as far as I can tell, and structured, unstructured data, Google Drive, SharePoint. I think there's a big, I think the new control point that's happening in the software stack is where is the intelligence integration going to be on data? And I think that's going to be a huge control point, and where kind of wins that battle. And Snowflake obviously is very powerful in that regard. So I'd give it an optional, but as soon as it's released, essential.
Yeah, I think it's a very tough application to try to coordinate all the data, put it into, some semblance across the various stacks. Yeah, I think it is difficult, but great try. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, optional, going optional. Adam, Paul?
Optional for me. Yeah, not out yet.
Not out yet, and it's hard. Yeah, optional. All right, let's go next.
Oh, can I just say one other on that? And I'm actually writing an article on it. But the traditional way of thinking about data is really upended. Like instead of trying to clean data, garbage in, garbage out, all that other stuff. It's more about, do I have quality signal in that data, and can I use the model to get at that signal? And that's a very different role for data. And I think Snowflake and Databricks are really well positioned.
And John, on just a footnote on that, it's synthetic data. It's still getting good debate about, can I get a good enough signal in synthetic data to actually, and there's a story floating around, I'm trying to find out if it's true or not, that somebody used synthetic data on the election results by voter sentiment and ran it for a few million and got really good, accurate predictions here. So,
fascinating. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and to be able to do that without getting to model collapse, right? Because if you rely too much on the generated data, but it's a balance, and
I'm looking forward to more tools on capturing that signal, John, because it's a semantic, it's sort of a meta level understanding of where the data is and what to expect of this data, right? And we do have these tools that are coming up, but I think they will be critical for this type of integration. So we'll have to see.
I mean, I was taught statistics by hardcore Bayesians, and the idea that you would go fishing the data without an understanding of the process they would shoot you for, and so anyway, it's interesting. I think we're going to have to go back to that kind of Bayesian understanding of what might be in the data, what process are we after, even if we're using an inductive model,
Yeah, totally. Okay, that's very interesting. All right, but optional it is. Let's go next.
Okay, this next one comes from Node Research, and it talks about their Forge Reasoning API beta. And they are saying that they can make any model reason like OpenAI's own preview model.
Yeah, interesting group in New York. They started as a group of enthusiasts and pulled together, got some money, like 5 million or so, and their focus is distributive AI and with some reasoning, and they are really stuck to their guns, and that's the next announcement. What do you think about this, Tim?
I thought this was interesting. I'm going to give it an optional because it's a little technical, but I could be talked into important because they've taken the sort of reasoning approach a little bit further and integrated. They've done two things I think that are interesting here. They've integrated a few reasoning approaches, including a Monte Carlo approach, which I can talk about a little more, but I think is quite interesting. And another reason that I keep saying, even I'm surprised at how far in reasoning you can get with these effectively statistical models that don't have any underlying world model. And the use of Monte Carlo and sort of random approaches actually is how a lot of nature works. So could be interesting. And the other thing is they allow you to put in any model you want. They focus on the Hermes model, which is what they use directly, but they also separated the model again from the inference engine, so you can plug in multiple models and in fact use multiple models simultaneously and compare the results. So really interesting article. It's a little bit researchy, so we'll see how it actually comes out in if people start using this. Another example of open source, again, getting very, very high performance comparable to the best models at the state of the art. And, you know, this idea of using Monte Carlo or any kind of random search, people, for a long time, I was involved in some of the early robotics work way back when Shaky the robot was trying to get across the room at Stanford and had a really tough time of it. And a lot of the problem was we were hung up on how we think humans do this completely top down and trying to understand completely where things are. But in fact, in nature, most animals will try and get somewhere, and if it doesn't work for a while, they'll just randomly go. Like bees and insects, they will, you know, they always try and fly up when they're trapped in a house or something, but they'll randomize very quickly. And, you know, if you want to get around a wall, that's a much more effective algorithm for a robot. Keep beating your head against the wall for 10 seconds, and if that doesn't work, just randomly pick a different direction. That's how Ethernet works. That's how lots and lots of things work. That are
John, it doesn't work for marriage, though.
That's a different subject. Anyway, so very interesting for people interested in architectures and thing. I think optional for the day-to-day AI leader.
Yeah. Okay. Adam, Paul, John, agree? Optional?
Yeah, I'll add just that we've been talking recently about, and I think it was maybe even just yesterday, about this shift in terms of the training of these models and the pushing into the inference, and how the new O1 model has this reasoning built into it. So it's interesting to see this approach that they're taking, and very smart to take the learnings in terms of where you can grow further by adding this reasoning layer and just extracting that and separating it from the foundational model, so that they can models that are already out there can leverage and benefit that technology.
That piece, Adam, that you
Yes.
are talking about, and Tim also noted that they separated the inference from the models. I think it's worth highlighting, even into
that's important. To Tim's point, it's pretty technical, and as long as we highlight it so that they can understand what we're trying to bring to their attention, if they just start at the top and start reading it, they might just sort of lose interest, because it does get pretty deep. But
yeah, I would highlight that particular piece because we haven't seen it before. It's innovative. It's totally open source. And it will add. It has a promise to add a layer of inference or reasoning, right? Reasoning inference on top of a foundational model, which is quite important progress. So
Yeah.
how about important?
Sure, I could support important. You know, I mean, this whole notion of, you know, the whole conversations about hallucinations and all that other stuff, it's just, they're looking at the wrong problem. Hallucinations, yes, okay, you need a quality output, but we're hybridizing these models, right? And we're gonna, you know, even a lot of the big models already have a hybridized model. So we're gonna have deterministic models, we're gonna have, you know, probabilistic models, we're gonna have data lookups, we're gonna have Monte Carlo simulations, we're gonna have, you know, and the really challenging part is, what is the objective function that you're optimizing along as you go across these different things? And that's going to be tricky. And you know, when he's talking about stuff like bias and so forth, that's just, we don't have a universal ethics to drive that optimization function. So, you know, we're always going to run into that problem. Anyway.
Okay, important it is. Let's go next.
Okay, the next one that we have comes from S&P Global, and it talks about their Kensho LLM Ready API, which makes it easy for organizations to use S&P's financial data.
Yes. Adam, what do you think?
I was on the fence between optional and important. It's certainly important as a concept in terms of allowing people to start using natural language queries and APIs to access these vast wells of data, which extends that model of owning your own intelligence and starts to extend that value out into your customer base, allowing them to leverage it. I think I would say it's important for financial services because it's mostly financial data, but I can also understand in other industries and businesses where financial data about partners, about competitors, about people that you're getting products from or selling products to could offer a tremendous wealth of information and value. So I'm probably talking myself into an important on this. The concept is really that S&P Global now has an API. It's in beta, but it allows people to use models like ChatGPT and access through an API their global financial data, which is pretty powerful.
I guess going on important. John, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I sort of would have it as essential for people in the financial industry and then maybe optional for others. And to John's earlier point, wow, this one even more so. I mean, if S&P is giving away access to their core data through an API for use for other people to build LLMs, man, talk about giving away the store. It'll be interesting to see. But you know, it's not that relevant unless you want financial data from a day-to-day perspective.
But as citizens, right, you sometimes do want this financial data.
Yeah, but citizens in general, I don't think are going to go after an API. This is aimed at sophisticated institutions. This is aimed at Fidelity and JP Morgan and Chase.
I guess the challenge to that, Tim, would be that if it is natural language queries and people can just ask questions and talk about companies, I can see where to a general user, to a consumer almost, this could end up being a valuable tool.
Yeah,
and could be, but I don't believe they've released a chatbot. They've released an API to create chatbots, and they have a couple of their own. So it wasn't quite clear from the article. This is about an API, not about a chatbot. So unclear. And again, it's really about the licensing and how they protect it and charge for it. So there's a lot of details that are unwritten here.
Yeah, the pricing model is not clear at all. But what do you think about it, John?
Yeah, I was going to give it an important, I think, look, anybody who's got proprietary data organized in an old-fashioned way is going to have to, compete somehow, whether they decide to vertically integrate into their own interface and chatbot and so forth, or create APIs as well. And this is strategic. We used to teach a case on Reuters versus Bloomberg, and Reuters opened up their architecture and they got crushed, and Bloomberg kept it vertically integrated and kept adding more and more data and more capability within their stack. And they made it, as Mike Bloomberg is still one of the richest guys in the world. So I think this is absolutely strategic. People are going to want to consume this information this way, and what your decisions about what you control and how you price it and so forth is to all these people. Equifax, these folks, back to even the conversation about Bear, I think it's relevant. So I give it an important.
Okay, yeah, I was going to go important as well, because like what you, Tim, said, essential for one piece and optional for maybe some, but S&P is the large entity in the financial space, and they're opening some of their really proprietary data, which is an interesting. Same with Bear, right? So it's how this will shake out and serve as an example for other enterprises is an important development. So I think important. Okay, important it is.
Okay, the last one that we have comes from Microsoft, and Microsoft has introduced new adapted AI models for industry.
Okay, John, what do you think about it? This is a key announcement, yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to make the case for essential on this one because, this is, and the whole, as we talked about before, as we get into the automation of cognition and the making tacit knowledge explicit and, really understanding, what the intelligence of your organization is. I think this is massive that you have these companies that are now making these capabilities available. And I would argue if you put it in a Azure AI model like this, you're giving much broader access to your intelligence than if you had just sold an application. Because the applications implicitly have guardrails in them in terms of what they can answer and can't answer. These also have guardrails, of course, but I think they're much broader. So I would say this is essential to understand three things. What is Microsoft doing in this domain? They're obviously forward integrating into models with partners, very much like NVIDIA. Second, these capabilities, if you're in these industries, and just there's going to be more and more of these intelligence applications, if you will. And the third thing that I'm really wary about is you really want to do this with, it's like the old thing that somebody said about politicians: don't make enemies of people who buy ink by the barrel. Back when we used to print things, right? In this thing, I'm not sure I want to have a partner that's got so much market power like Microsoft as I'm distributing my intelligence.
Yeah, so I was also thinking essential. I think it's a very smart move for Microsoft.
Oh yeah,
totally strategic and very powerful. And even if they just leverage their small models, and that's what they are doing here across the board, leveraging small models, I think they might leave the licensing to those players, to those partners, and get a very small fraction of the license. And that would make that model for the other enterprises very powerful, because it will be one place where people will go to get the vertical applications, right? Vertical application models. So it's very smart on the part of Microsoft, and also quite important for specific, like agriculture, crop protection, financial, customer service. This is quite significant. Tim, what do you think? Adam?
I can go along with essential. Yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting things about it that it's worth the read for most AI leaders. Again, as John says, just to understand what Microsoft is doing. I find it interesting that they lead with this really is a cloud thing. And so I wonder if Nadella and the rest of the executive crew are really thinking, hey, this is just a way to sell more cloud, which it will and already has. But that's a low margin business over the long run, although they're making high margins on it now. And so maybe that's what they think, is they can keep charging lots of money for commodity services. And if they can, more power to them. But it's dangerous to be in a scaled commodity business, because at the end of the day, it usually ends up looking like a grocery store. So we'll see. But I think it's a brilliant move on their part, absolutely, whether they're trying to drive other things or just cloud usage. And they're fast. Again, for a big company, they have been ahead at every step and every turn so far. And I haven't seen anything else like this. It's one level, an obvious thing to do: work with industry partners, develop industry verticals, create a marketplace for them to drive your services. Smart idea. And I haven't seen it anywhere else. So
our friends at Colaberry are saying that Amazon and Google already provide these kind of data sets and models, as well as,
but not applications, and not in an organized store that I'm aware of.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, those are the ones that Microsoft is offering, is already models that are used out there. Like Bayer is a crop protection model that anybody can use to define what they are doing with their crops. So it's very, complete, as John is pointing out. So it's a little bit different, it sounds like.
Also interesting that they're pushing their small model. So again, another diversification tactic, also following the trends we've seen. The one that was most interesting was the car app, because by using a small model, it can be independent in the car. You don't need a big connection back to 5,000 NVIDIA chips.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, comfortable with essential?
Yeah, absolutely. Tim pointed it out there, but at the top level within Microsoft, the metric they use is ACR, Azure Consumed Revenue. And this is going to drive it, right? It's a very smart move.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get our score for today. And as we're doing that, I want to shout out to Ankash, who is a critical resource for this news. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have those wonderful articles to review. So thank you, Ankash. And your presence is always, and your introduction of those articles is wonderful. So thank you very much. So we have today one essential, 4 importance, and one.
This is a big news day.
What a day. Yes. Thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.